Hey everyone! Tonight, we begin with a sound the faint hum of two refrigerators running side by side in the same kitchen. One belonged to me, the other to the strangers living in my house who used to call me Mom. You might not survive this one, not because it's violent, but because it's real. Because somewhere in this story, you might recognize a voice like your own. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And tell me where you're watching from, what time it is there. I love knowing who's keeping me company in these quiet, late hours. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. When I came home from the hospital, I was still tender from the stitches across my abdomen, 11 days of IV drips, nurses' shoes squeaking through sterile hallways, and the metallic taste of fear that comes when you start wondering if your heart's strong enough to keep you alive through the night. 11 days and not one visit from my son Jacob or his wife Vanessa. I told myself maybe they were busy. Maybe the hospital made them nervous. I still believed in excuses back then. A nurse helped me into a cab. I rode home clutching a paper bag of antibiotics, my clothes too loose from the weight I'd lost. My little brick house on Sycamore Street waited, quiet and still. The lawn needed trimming, and the curtains I'd sewn myself hung uneven, but it was home. When I opened the door, silence greeted me, and then confusion. There was a smell of expensive groceries in the air, something buttery and sharp. And there, beside my old white refrigerator, the one my husband, Walter, had bought secondhand in 1985, stood a brand new stainless steel one. Big, gleaming, cold. And on the front, bright neon labels with Vanessa's handwriting in perfect block letters. Vanessa's Produce, Vanessa's Meat, Vanessa's Wine. My heart stumbled. Jacob appeared from the living room, beer in hand, wearing the same worn sweatpants he'd had on the week I went into surgery. "Oh, hey, Mom, you're back early." "Early," I said softly. "The doctor discharged me today." Right, he said, barely looking up. "Well, good. Glad you're okay." Vanessa followed him in, all perfume and attitude, carrying a pack of adhesive labels and a Sharpie. "You're home," she said, like it was an inconvenience. I looked at the fridge again. "What's this?" "Our fridge," Jacob said, cracking open another beer. "For our stuff." "Your fridge?" "Yeah. Mom, we thought it'd make things easier. No offense." "No offense," Vanessa echoed as she crouched down, slapping her name onto every shelf. "We just like different things. We buy organic. We meal prep. You know, healthier choices." The word healthier hit harder than it should have, I was still recovering from surgery, my hands shaking as I tried to put my hospital bag down. "But this is my kitchen," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Jacob shrugged. "Yeah, Mom, but we live here too. Remember? You don't really buy the kind of food we eat anyway." Vanessa stood and smiled sweetly, that brand of politeness that hides contempt. It's just practical. "Eleanor, you buy your groceries with your money. And we buy ours with ours. No mix-ups, no confusion." I blinked at her. "I've never denied you anything from my fridge." "I know," Jacob said, leaning against the counter. "But this is just fair." Fair. That word rang in my chest like a cracked bell. I looked from their shiny new refrigerator to my old one, dented, humming, half empty. Their fridge gleamed like it belonged to another world, bottles of imported juice, stacks of gourmet meats, expensive wines. Mine held a few eggs, a half-empty carton of milk, and bread that had gone a little stiff. Vanessa closed the stainless steel door with a satisfied click. "We have certain standards. Eleanor, please don't take offense." I wanted to scream, to tell them that this house, my house, had been paid for with 40 years of labor at the textile mill, that I had ruined my back so Jacob could go to college, selling my wedding ring to pay for his tuition deposit when he changed majors 3 times. But all I could manage was a whisper. "This is my home." Jacob let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, Mom, you're home. But you know, We're helping keep things going. And frankly, your pension barely covers your medicine. We need to live decently, too. That word again, decently. Vanessa brushed invisible dust off her sweater. Don't take it personally. It's just the way things have to be now. She walked out, humming, proud of her handiwork. Her name was plastered across every shelf like a claim of ownership. I stood there, trembling. The smell of disinfectant from the hospital still clung to me. My stitches pulled when I breathed too deeply. I was still supposed to be healing, and here I was, breaking in new ways. I'm going to rest, I said quietly. Sure, Mom. Rest up, Jacob answered, already turning toward the living room where the TV blared some game show. The sound of the fridge door closing again echoed through the kitchen, a sharp, metallic finality that said you don't belong here anymore. I made my way down the hallway, dragging my small hospital bag behind me. The guest room, as they now called it, used to be my sewing room. Now it was barely big enough for a twin bed and a lamp. I sat down, feeling the ache crawl through my chest, and finally, I cried. Hot, quiet tears that tasted like salt and betrayal. From the living room, I heard laughter, clinking glasses, the sound of celebration. I thought maybe they were toasting to my survival. But deep down, I knew better. They were celebrating my surrender. Maybe they thought the old woman was too tired to fight, that I'd fade into the background, grateful for the scraps of space they hadn't claimed yet. But as I lay there in the dark, something inside me shifted. All my life, I'd mistaken endurance for peace. I'd mistaken silence for love. But that night, that very night, I realized something important. They had made a terrible mistake. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. But when morning came, they would learn who Eleanor Brooks truly was. And that lesson would cost them everything. Sleep didn't come easy that night. My body ached in waves, but it wasn't just from the surgery. It was from something deeper, the kind of pain that doesn't show up on scans or blood tests, the kind that builds slowly, quietly, over years of being overlooked by the very people you once carried in your arms. I stared up at the cracked ceiling of that tiny back room, tracing the shape of the shadows. Every sound from the house felt louder in the dark. Vanessa's laugh sharp and high-pitched, the low hum of Jacob's voice, the clinking of wine glasses, and underneath it all, the steady, smug rhythm of that new refrigerator running, filling the silence I used to own. When you've lived long enough, you learn something strange about cruelty. It rarely arrives as a thunderstorm. It comes like a slow leak, a little at a time, until one day you look around and realize you're drowning. And I had been drowning for years without noticing. I remembered when Jacob was born July 3rd, 1981. The doctor had placed him in my arms, red-faced and furious at the world. His father, Walter, had cried like a boy himself. We had nothing but love and a cheap second-hand crib, but I thought that was enough. I raised Jacob through scraped knees, school plays, heartbreaks, and all the invisible storms that come with growing up. And when Walter died 15 years ago, a heart attack on the job, I thought Jacob would be my anchor. He'd promised he would. "You'll never be alone. Mom," he said, holding my hand at the funeral, "I'll always take care of you." I should have known that promise had an expiration date. Things were fine until Vanessa came along. She was beautiful, polished, and had that way of talking that made you feel small for not knowing which wine paired with what meal. From the moment she stepped into my home, I felt it, that cold appraisal in her eyes, like she was taking inventory. I told myself I was imagining it. Mothers often do when they don't want to admit they're losing their sons. They got married within 6 months, a wedding so lavish it nearly bankrupted them. I gave them $10,000 from my savings because I wanted Jacob to be happy. He told me they'd pay it back. They never did. Then came the endless phone calls. "Mom, our car broke down. Can you lend us $3,000, Mom? Vanessa's tooth cracked. She needs urgent dental work. Mom, we're short on rent." I always said yes. I told myself that's what love looked like, giving until it hurt. But what I didn't realize was that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's surrender. When I finally retired from the factory, I thought maybe, finally, life would slow down. My pension was small, but my house was paid off. I had plans to fix the garden, maybe join a quilting group. Then the pandemic hit, and Jacob and Vanessa temporarily moved in. That word temporarily became a curse. At first, they helped a little, paid the electric bill, brought groceries, but soon their help turned into control. They started rearranging my kitchen, throwing away old pots, criticizing how I cooked. "This isn't healthy, Mom," Vanessa would say, wrinkling her perfect nose. "You shouldn't fry things. You're not young anymore." As if my age were a disease she might catch. "They took my bedroom next. We need more space," Jacob said. "You'll be more comfortable in the sewing room. It's cozier." Cozy, that's what people say when they mean smaller. Then came the television. The big one I didn't need but somehow ended up paying for. Then the endless deliveries boxes, furniture, expensive gadgets, things they couldn't possibly afford. And still, I said nothing. Because when you're a mother, silence becomes your first language. The requests became demands. My savings vanished like dust in the wind. And when I finally realized I was almost broke, it was too late. The money was gone. The warmth of my home was gone. And so was my son. The boy I had raised had been replaced by a stranger who thought of me as an inconvenience. But even then, I never expected the final blow coming home from the hospital, weak and bruised, and finding that fridge with Vanessa's name plastered across it like a victory flag. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. Because late that night, as I lay in that narrow bed, I heard something through the thin wall that separated my room from theirs. Vanessa's voice soft, smug. "She won't last much longer," she whispered. Jacob's voice followed, low and careless. "I know. Once she's gone. The house is ours. It's worth at least 200 grand. My hand froze in midair. My breath caught. I pressed my palm against the wall as if I could stop the words from reaching me. "She's old. Jacob, it won't take long. And then we can finally sell this place. Get what we deserve." Deserve. There was that word again. My throat burned. My pulse thudded in my ears. Jacob chuckled softly. "Yeah, I just hope she hurries up. I'm tired of pretending to care." The laughter that followed was faint, but it carved itself into my bones. That night, I didn't sleep, not even for a second. I just lay there, watching the slow crawl of dawn through the curtains, my body trembling with something new, not sadness, not even anger, resolve. You see, I'd always believed that good people eventually get rewarded, that patience was noble, that forgiveness was holy. But that morning, I realized something the world doesn't often tell you. Sometimes patience just gives cruel people more time to sharpen their knives. So, as the first sunlight touched the labels on that shiny new fridge, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't cry anymore. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't try to remind them of who I used to be. They wanted a war, and I would give them one. When dawn broke that morning, the light felt different, harsh, almost surgical, like it wanted to expose everything I'd been pretending not to see. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded tight in my lap, my stitches pulled when I breathed, but the ache in my chest had nothing to do with healing flesh. It was the pain of waking up, truly waking up to the life you've let happen around you. I'd spent so many years believing that love meant giving until there was nothing left to give. I see now that I mistook my fear of loneliness for generosity. The house was quiet except for the fridge's twin hums, mine and theirs, a duet of resentment that filled the air. I stood and moved slowly through the hallway, my steps soft against the creaking wood floors. Every room I passed seemed smaller, invaded, their clothes on my couch, their shoes scattered by the door, their laughter still haunting the air like the echo of something rotten. The kitchen smelled like old wine and expensive takeout. The dishes were piled high in the sink, lobster shells, steak bones, things I hadn't tasted in years. I glanced out the window and saw my neighbor, Martha, watering her azaleas in her big straw hat. The morning sun lit her silver hair like a halo. She was humming something soft, something peaceful. I hadn't felt peace in a long time. We'd lived side by side for 20 years, but our friendship had never gone deeper than polite smiles and borrowed sugar. Still, that morning, when she looked up and saw me standing in the window, something in her face changed. She put the watering can down, crossed the street, and knocked on my door. I hesitated before opening it. I didn't want anyone to see how small I'd become, the hospital pallor still clinging to my skin, the defeat hiding in my eyes. But something inside whispered, "Open it anyway." "Eleanor," she said with that warm, no-nonsense voice only women past 70 seem to have. "You're back. How are you holding up?" I tried to smile. Better every day. She studied me for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp but kind, the kind that sees straight through pretense. "Can I come in for a minute?" I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because I hadn't been truly seen in months. Maybe because I was tired of pretending I was fine. She stepped into the kitchen, and the first thing she saw was that second refrigerator gleaming, proud, covered in bright stickers with Vanessa's name. "Well," Martha said, setting her purse down on the counter, "that's new." "It's for their groceries," I said quietly. "Jacob and Vanessa's, they didn't want mix-ups." Her lips tightened. Mix-ups. They like different food, more expensive things. Martha didn't speak for a few seconds. Then she turned to me and said softly, "Eleanor, I don't mean to pry, but I hear things. Our walls aren't as thick as we like to believe." I looked down at my trembling hands. You've heard them." She nodded slowly. "Last night, after you came home from the hospital, I heard everything." My stomach dropped. Everything. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes had gone cold. "Vanessa said you wouldn't last much longer." And Jacob laughed. He said he was tired of pretending to care. I wish I hadn't heard it. But I did. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying not to cry. "And that's not all," she continued, her voice steady but burning with quiet outrage. "A few weeks ago, I saw Jacob leaving the bank with a stack of papers." He looked nervous. "And Vanessa, she's been getting packages, big ones, designer boxes, more than I can count." The room swayed for a moment. "They've been stealing from me," I whispered. "I think it's worse than stealing," Martha said. "They're setting things up behind your back." I felt something rise in me, not tears, not rage, something colder, sharper. What do I do? Martha placed a firm hand over mine. "You don't do it alone. I have a friend, Daniel Price. He's a retired lawyer, but he still helps people like us. He handled my sister's case when her nephew tried to drain her savings." Her words made my heart race. I don't know if I can go through something like that." "Eleanor," she said softly, "what they're doing isn't family squabbling. It's financial abuse. It's theft. You deserve better than this." For the first time in months, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in anyone's belief. She believed I wasn't crazy, that what I felt wasn't exaggeration or paranoia. She pulled out her phone. "Let me call Daniel. He'll come by this afternoon. You just need to show him what you have, any papers, any bank statements, anything you've signed recently." I nodded numbly. "Okay." She smiled, that same practical smile that had probably carried her through every storm in her life. 3 o'clock. We'll get this sorted. You're not alone anymore. Honey." She left, but her words stayed like an ember in my chest, burning quietly. For years, I'd told myself that asking for help meant weakness, but maybe it was the opposite. Maybe it was the first sign of strength. That afternoon, when Martha and Daniel arrived, I was ready. Ready in a way I hadn't been in years. Daniel was tall and well-kept, with a voice that filled the room even when he spoke softly. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, shaking my hand, "I'm here to help you get your life back." Those words hit something deep inside me. Get your life back. I didn't even realize I'd lost it until that moment. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where I used to feed Jacob pancakes when he was 5, and I laid everything out: bank statements, letters, old documents, anything I could find. Daniel went through them with a patience that reminded me of Walter. Each paper he read seemed to harden his expression. Finally, he looked up. "Eleanor, this isn't just exploitation. It's fraud. I can see unauthorized transactions, forged signatures, even a pending home loan tied to your property. If that loan goes through, they could sell this house without your consent." I froze. "My house." He nodded gravely. "We have to act fast. Tomorrow morning, we go to the bank. You'll revoke every authorization you've ever given Jacob. We'll report the fraud, freeze your credit, and make sure he can't touch another dime of your money." My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. "What if they find out I whispered?" Martha leaned forward, her voice firm. "Then they'll find out the hard way that you're not the woman they think you are." For the first time since Walter's funeral, I smiled a quiet smile that tasted like resolve. That night, as I sat alone, the house still didn't feel like mine, but my heart, it was starting to. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still too still, like it knew something was about to happen. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the first thin rays of dawn crawl across the floorboards. My stitches still pulled when I moved, but I didn't wince. Pain was just background noise now, a reminder that healing, in every form, demands endurance. I slipped into my best clothes, a navy blue dress with tiny white buttons that Walter always said made me look respectable but dangerous. It had been years since I'd cared how I looked, but that morning I did. Not for vanity, for power. When you've been dismissed long enough, dignity becomes your armor. The clock read 7:45 when I heard a car horn outside. Martha. I peeked through the curtain and saw her sitting in her old Buick, hair neatly pinned, determination on her face. Beside her sat Daniel Price, calm and sharp in his gray suit. Before leaving, I poured coffee into a mug, not to drink, just to steady my hands. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, Jacob moving around. The bathroom door closed. Water running. I froze, holding my breath until the sound faded. I left the mug on the counter and walked quietly to the door. Going somewhere, Jacob's voice made me stop cold. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, barefoot, holding his phone, eyes half open. "Doctor's appointment." I lied smoothly. "Post-op checkup." He yawned. "Want me to drive you?" "No need. Martha's taking me." That seemed to satisfy him. "Okay, don't forget to pick up more milk. We're almost out." The casual arrogance of that sentence burned. We're almost out, as if the groceries came from his wallet, not mine. I just smiled faintly. I'll keep that in mind. When I stepped outside, the air hit me like a baptism cool, sharp, cleansing. I got into Martha's car and she gave me a small nod. "Ready?" "I think so," I said. Daniel turned slightly in his seat. "Don't think. Eleanor, no, you've done nothing wrong. You're not the one who should be nervous." The drive to the bank took 20 minutes. The morning sun washed over the quiet streets, and for a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Almost. The bank was a modern building with tall glass windows. Inside, it smelled like new paper and perfume, that faintly artificial freshness that always made me uneasy. A young woman greeted us at the counter with a rehearsed smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Daniel handed her his card. "We need to speak with the branch manager. It's regarding a serious case of financial fraud against Mrs. Eleanor Brooks." Her smile faltered. "One moment, please." Within minutes, a man in a dark suit appeared, late 50s, polished but kind. His nameplate read, "Marcus Green Branch Manager." "Mrs. Brooks," he said, shaking my hand. "Please come with me." We followed him to a small glass office. Daniel did most of the talking, his tone even but firm. I sat quietly, clutching my purse, watching Marcus's face grow more serious with every document Daniel laid before him, forged signatures, mysterious withdrawals, a pending home equity loan I had never authorized. When he finished reading, Marcus let out a slow breath. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, looking me in the eye, "this is extremely serious. You were about a week away from losing your home. I felt the room tilt slightly. Losing my home. Yes, the loan paperwork lists your son, Jacob Brooks, as a co-signer, which is irregular since he's not listed as a co-owner. And the signature on your portion, he turned the screen toward me, has been digitally forged. We'll need to escalate this immediately. Daniel nodded. We need to freeze all accounts, cancel every authorization under Jacob's name, and initiate a fraud claim. Marcus typed rapidly, clicking through forms. Done. His access is revoked. He won't be able to withdraw a cent. For the first time in months, I exhaled without shaking. He continued, there have also been $42,000 in suspicious transfers over the past 2 years, multiple ATM withdrawals in locations inconsistent with your usual activity. 42,000, I whispered. Martha's hand found mine under the table. We'll open a full investigation, Marcus assured. You are not liable for any fraudulent debt. You will not be responsible for paying it back. The bank will pursue recovery directly from the perpetrators. Perpetrators? He'd said it like a police officer, like I wasn't crazy, like I had been a victim, not a burden. It was strange how validation could hurt and heal at the same time. Marcus printed a thick packet of documents. Sign here to confirm your fraud report, Mrs. Brooks. I signed with careful strokes. For the first time, I read every line. By the time we left the bank, the weight in my chest felt lighter, but a new kind of fire had taken its place, the kind that burns slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. Back in the car, Daniel turned to me. The house is safe now. They can't touch it, but you have a choice to make. What kind of choice? Whether to confront them tonight or wait until we file the official charges? I thought about the fridge, the labels, Vanessa's smug smile, the way Jacob laughed when he thought I couldn't hear. Tonight, I said, I want them to see my face when it ends. Martha gave a small grin. That's my girl? When we got home, I half expected to find the house ransacked, but it was exactly as I'd left it, quiet, smug, and smelling faintly of Vanessa's perfume. Daniel walked through the rooms with his phone, taking photos of everything, the 2 fridges, the designer boxes, the piles of luxury clothes and receipts scattered on their nightstand. All of this, he said, is evidence of living beyond their means. When people steal, they spend to feel powerful. It's almost predictable. He was right. I remembered a fact I'd once read that elephants never forget an injury. Maybe mothers don't either. By 5:30, we had everything documented. At 6 sharp, I heard the front door unlock, laughter, shopping bags rustling. Martha placed her hand on my shoulder. You ready? Eleanor. I nodded, more than ever. Jacob walked in first, holding a new pair of sneakers. Vanessa followed, swinging a glossy bag from some boutique. They froze when they saw us, me, Martha, and Daniel, waiting in the living room like a jury. Mom, Jacob's voice was cautious. What's going on? Sit down, I said quietly. Vanessa scoffed. We just got home. Can this wait? I'm starving. No, I said, it can't. They exchanged glances, the first hint of nervousness flickering between them. This, Daniel said, stepping forward, is about the $42,000 you stole from your mother. The color drained from Jacob's face. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. You forged her signature, Daniel continued, laying out the papers one by one on the coffee table. You opened credit accounts in her name, transferred money to your own accounts, and attempted to mortgage this home behind her back. We have documentation, bank confirmation, and a pending investigation. Jacob's voice broke. That's not true. It's a mistake. I looked at him, my own son, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see the boy I'd raised. I saw a man shaped by greed. No, I said softly. The mistake was thinking I'd never find out. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, the sky was turning violet, the kind of dusky purple that hides tears and fury in equal measure. And in that fragile twilight, the balance of power in my house shifted forever. For a moment, no one moved. The sound of the ceiling fan filled the silence, slow and steady like a heartbeat, marking time in the room where everything had just changed. Jacob's mouth opened, then closed again. His face looked pale, unshaven, unfamiliar. Vanessa stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes darting between Daniel and me, trying to gauge who had the upper hand. Finally, she laughed short and brittle. "You can't be serious. Fraud against family. That's ridiculous." Daniel didn't flinch. "What's ridiculous? Mrs. Brooks is opening a home equity loan in your mother-in-law's name and attempting to sell her house while she was in the hospital. We have the documents. We have the dates. We even have the digital signature log." Vanessa's smile faltered, but she recovered fast. "This is all some misunderstanding. Eleanor must have signed something and forgotten. She's old," I finished for her, my voice steady, confused. "That's what you were hoping, wasn't it?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. Jacob's voice cracked as he spoke. "Mom, please. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I was just managing your finances like you asked me to. Maybe I made a few transfers to cover expenses. But I was going to put it all back." "Stop," I said. He did. Expenses, like the $700 shoes in that box by the bed, or the wine subscription under my name, or maybe the $42,000 missing from my savings. He rubbed his hands together, shaking his head. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "You lied to me, Jacob. You used my trust like it was a credit card with no limit. There's something quiet about betrayal when it happens in daylight. It's not dramatic, it's hollow. It sounds like air being let out of a balloon." Vanessa sighed dramatically and turned to Daniel. "Look, this is getting ridiculous. You can't just barge in here, throw around accusations, and expect us to—" Daniel opened his briefcase calmly and laid out each piece of paper like a dealer setting down cards in a game no one could win. Bank withdrawal slips, forged signatures, a pending home equity loan application, screenshots of transactions linked to their joint account. Then he pointed to the legal header on top of each page. "Everything here is verified. This isn't a family disagreement, it's a criminal case, and I am her legal counsel." The words landed like thunder. Vanessa's eyes darted toward Jacob, panic flickering beneath her makeup. "You said you handled everything," she hissed. I thought I did," he stammered. "I didn't think she'd—" "What, hire a lawyer?" I said. "You didn't think I could read, could you? Or think or act?" He tried to step closer, but Daniel stood between us, calm but immovable. "Let's make this simple," Daniel said. "You both have two choices. One, you repay every cent you stole, vacate this house, and sign a legal confession acknowledging the fraud. If you cooperate, we will not press criminal charges. Or two, we go straight to the police tomorrow morning. Forgery, elder abuse, and financial theft carry prison sentences of 5 to 15 years. Vanessa's voice rose. "You can't threaten us like that." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "It's not a threat. It's a choice." The room grew so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming that same new, gleaming monument to their arrogance. I decided then that I never wanted to hear that sound again. "I want you both out," I said, "tonight." Jacob's jaw dropped. "Out, Mom, this is our home too." "This is my home," I said, the calmness in my voice surprising even me. "Your father built it, and I paid it off. You were a guest here, and you've worn out your welcome." Vanessa scoffed. "You can't evict us without notice." Daniel slipped a paper from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Actually, she can. You are not tenants. You are unauthorized occupants. This is an official notice of eviction, effective immediately. If you refuse to leave, I'll have officers here within the hour." Vanessa's expression twisted. "This is insane." "No," I said softly. "This is justice." The next 2 hours felt like a strange kind of theater, the end of a play where the villains packed their props in silence. Vanessa stormed up the stairs first, muttering curses under her breath. Jacob followed, slower, like a man walking into his own grave. From the living room, Martha and I could hear drawers slamming, hangers clattering, and the occasional muffled argument. Martha leaned close and whispered, "You all right?" I nodded. Though the truth was complicated, my heart hurt in ways I didn't have names for. "It's strange," I said quietly. "You spend a lifetime raising someone to be good, and when they show you who they are, it feels like losing a limb." Martha's hand found mine. Sometimes losing what's rotten is the only way the rest can heal. Upstairs, Vanessa's heels clacked like gunshots on the floorboards. She came down first, dragging a designer suitcase stuffed with clothes and perfume bottles. Her eyes were red, but her voice was venom. "You'll regret this, Eleanor. You'll die alone in this dump." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll die free." She blinked, speechless, then pushed past me toward the door. Jacob followed minutes later with 3 heavy duffel bags. His face was gray, his eyes sunken. He paused in the doorway, looking smaller than he ever had in his life. "Mom," he said quietly, "please don't do this. We can fix it." "I did fix it," I replied, "by ending it." He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know." I said, "You just didn't care if you did." He lowered his gaze. For a second, I thought I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms and whisper, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll protect you." But that boy was long gone. He left without another word. When the door finally closed, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. I walked to that new stainless steel refrigerator, opened it one last time, and stared at the neat shelves lined with expensive meats and cheeses, the shiny bottles, the stickers with Vanessa's name. I peeled one off slowly. The adhesive resisted, but it came away with a little hiss like the sound of something being exercised. One by one, I tore them all down. When the last label was gone, I stepped back, breathing hard but lighter. Then I whispered, "No more lines drawn in my own house." Later that night, after Daniel and Martha left, I sat alone in the living room. The house was messy, suitcases gone, shoes left behind, drawers open, but it was mine again. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet fill the space where their noise used to be. I thought about something Walter once said back in our early years. People don't change under comfort. They change under pressure. Maybe that was true for me, too. I looked around at the house, old wallpaper, scuffed baseboards, the smell of coffee grounds in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt home. And as the clock ticked softly past midnight, I said out loud to no one. They thought I was weak, but they forgot who built this life in the first place. The next morning felt strange lighter somehow, like the air had been scrubbed clean. I woke to the sound of birds outside the window instead of Vanessa's high-heeled footsteps or Jacob's booming voice on his phone. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was mine. I brewed my coffee slow, letting the scent fill the kitchen. I didn't rush. I didn't flinch when I walked past the empty hallway or the now bare spot where their luggage had been. Every creak of the house sounded softer, gentler, the way it used to. But when you've lived long enough, you learn something about quiet. It doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the pause before the next test. Around noon, my phone rang, unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Mrs. Brooks." A calm, official-sounding voice. "This is Officer Raymond with the Atlanta Police Department. We received a report last night from your son, Jacob Brooks." My heart clenched. What kind of report? He's alleging unlawful eviction and elder abuse. I almost laughed. The irony was sharp enough to cut. He said I abused him. "Yes, ma'am. We're required to follow up. Would you be available to speak with an officer this afternoon?" "Of course," I said. "And please bring a copy of his statement. I have something you'll want to see." After hanging up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my trembling hands. It never ends quickly, does it? Justice is a slow creature. It limps. I called Daniel first. He didn't sound surprised. "Typical," he said. "When abusers lose control, they play victim. Don't worry, Eleanor. We'll handle it." And we did. When Officer Raymond arrived that afternoon, I had every document neatly arranged on the table: bank records, signatures, copies of the eviction notice, even the fraud report from Marcus at the bank. Daniel sat beside me, calm as a stone, while the officer read everything carefully. When he finished, he took off his cap, exhaled slowly, and said, "Ma'am, I'm very sorry you've had to deal with this. There will be no further action against you. In fact," he looked at Daniel, "would you like us to initiate a report of financial exploitation?" Daniel nodded, already in motion. The officer smiled faintly. "Then I'll just file this as a resolved domestic claim. I'll also add a note that Mrs. Brooks has legal counsel and full control of her property." When he left, Daniel turned to me. He won't try that again. But deep down, I knew Jacob wasn't done. Not yet. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples, I found myself sitting on the porch steps, watching the streetlights flicker on. Martha came over with 2 mugs of tea. "I heard the cops stopped by," she said, handing me one. "They did." Jacob tried to play the victim. She shook her head. "Some people can't live without the drama they create." I smiled sadly. I keep asking myself when exactly I lost him. Was it when his father died, or when I let him think money was a love language? "Probably the second," she said gently. "Guilt makes terrible fertilizer. Eleanor, it grows all the wrong things." That made me laugh for the first time in days. You always have a way of putting it plain. Well, you don't raise 3 sons without learning how to call nonsense what it is. We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the crickets. The night felt almost kind. She said, after a pause, "My sister once told me something before she passed. She said, when people steal your peace, you don't fight to get it back, you rebuild it from scratch. That's what you're doing now." "I hope so," I murmured, "because the rebuilding feels harder than the fight." "It always does," she said, squeezing my hand. Over the next week, I started to reclaim my home piece by piece. I took down the modern art Vanessa had insisted on hanging in the hallway and replaced it with Walter's old watercolor of the Smoky Mountains. I scrubbed the walls until the smell of their perfume faded. I even cleaned out the fridge they'd bought, dumping out their imported cheeses and overpriced wine until only simple, ordinary food remained. And yet, every time I opened that shiny stainless steel door, I could still see the ghost of those stickers. Her shelf, his shelf, it reminded me of a quote I once read one of those old academic debates about ownership. "A home isn't made of property," it said, "but of presence." And maybe that's what had been missing all along. Presence, not money, not gifts, just kindness that stayed. One afternoon, Daniel called. "I have good news," he said. "The bank has confirmed fraud on all accounts. The loan's canceled, and your property deed is now flagged against unauthorized changes. You're fully protected." I leaned against the counter, tears prickling behind my eyes. "Thank you, Daniel. I don't know how to repay you." "You just did," he said, "by standing up for yourself." I smiled. "You sound like my husband used to." He chuckled softly. Smart man. Then, when I hung up, I looked around the kitchen, and for the first time, the silence didn't scare me. It comforted me. But peace has a strange way of testing you. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number again. A woman's voice, breathless and raw. "Mrs. Brooks, it's me, Vanessa." I froze. "What do you want?" "I just need to talk. Please. I'm sorry. Everything's gone wrong. Jacob's drinking. He lost his job. We have nowhere to go." Her words came out in gasps, heavy with panic. For a moment, I pictured her perfectly manicured hands now trembling, her polished life cracking apart. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "you and Jacob made your choices." I know we did, but I'm begging you just until we find a place." "Please?" I stared at the photo of Walter on the wall. He'd been gone 15 years, but I could almost hear his voice. "Mercy isn't weakness, Eleanor, but it's also not a door you open twice to the same storm." "No," I said softly. "I can't help you. Not this time." She started to cry. "You're heartless." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I can sleep at night." Then I hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, I lit a single candle in the kitchen and sat in the glow. The house felt alive again, not haunted, not heavy, just breathing. I thought about Walter, about the years we'd spent struggling to make this place a home, and I realized something survival isn't about fighting harder. It's about knowing when to stop fighting altogether. Because sometimes peace isn't something you win. It's something you reclaim quietly, one decision at a time. I blew out the candle, whispering to the dark, "I'm not done yet." Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and gold, painting my kitchen like forgiveness. For the first time in months, I woke up without dread sitting heavy on my chest. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. Still, part of me was restless. I'd survived the betrayal, won back my home, even tasted a little peace, but deep down, something was unfinished. Closure, I guess, isn't about revenge. It's about truth being spoken aloud so the ghosts can finally leave. That afternoon, Daniel stopped by again. He had a manila folder tucked under his arm and that measured, calm look lawyers carry when the news is serious but not catastrophic. "Good news first," he said as he sat down at the table. "The fraud investigation is officially closed. The bank won't pursue you for any losses. They'll be going after Jacob instead." I nodded slowly. "And the bad news?" He sighed. "Jacob's been served, but he's not working. There's no money to recover. The most you'll get is a court acknowledgement that you were wronged. So, justice on paper. Sometimes that's the only kind we get," he said gently. I poured us both tea. That's all right. I wasn't in it for the money anymore. I just needed the truth to live somewhere besides my own heart. He smiled faintly. "Then you've already won." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then he added, "By the way, Martha told me you've started fixing up the garden again." I chuckled, trying to, though I think the weeds are holding a family reunion out there. He laughed. "You should let them." "Sounds like they get along better than yours." I laughed harder than I meant to. It felt good, messy, loud, real. That afternoon, I decided to take my first real walk in months. The sky was clear, a rare thing in spring, and the air smelled like cut grass and new beginnings. I passed the houses I'd known for decades, each one holding its own quiet story. When I reached the little park at the end of the street, I stopped. There, sitting on a worn wooden bench, was Martha. She waved me over with that familiar knowing grin. "Thought I'd find you out and about," she said as I sat beside her. "I brought sandwiches. Tuna or turkey?" "Tuna," I said. "Always tuna." We ate in companionable silence, watching children chase each other around the swing set. For a moment, the world felt innocent again. "You did the right thing. You know," Martha said after a while. "I keep telling myself that," I said. "But sometimes at night, I still hear Jacob's voice, the way he begged me at the door. I wonder if I went too far." "You didn't," she said firmly. "He did. You just finally stopped letting him drag you down." Her words settled deep in me like roots finding soil. We sat there until the sun began to sink, turning everything amber and soft. I realized then that healing doesn't arrive with trumpets. It tiptoes in quietly, disguised as an ordinary day. A week later, a letter arrived. The envelope was thin, the handwriting unmistakably Jacob's. I almost threw it away, but something stopped me. I opened it with trembling fingers. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve it. But I want you to know I see what I did now. Vanessa's gone. She left when the money ran out. I've lost everything, my job, my house, even my own son. I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo, but I'm trying to be different. I've been going to therapy. I got a job at a construction company. It's not much, but it's honest. I've set up a payment plan with the bank to repay what I stole, even if it takes me years. I just hope one day you can look at me without shame. Your son, Jacob." I sat there for a long time, staring at the words until they blurred. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it was the first honest thing I'd heard from him in years. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the top drawer of my nightstand, not as forgiveness, but as proof that maybe redemption wasn't impossible. That night, I dreamed of Walter. He was sitting on the back porch, his old flannel shirt unbuttoned, holding a cup of coffee just the way he used to. "Hard road, huh?" he said, smiling that soft, lopsided smile of his. I sat beside him in the dream and whispered, "You'd be proud of me." He chuckled. I always was. When I woke up, my pillow was damp, but I wasn't sad, just lighter. In the following days, I noticed small shifts in myself. I stopped checking the locks twice every night. I played music again while cooking old Motown songs that made the walls hum. I even started painting the kitchen cabinets a cheerful pale yellow. The house was starting to reflect the woman who lived there, now older, yes, but unbroken. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the window and barely recognize her. There was strength in her face again, a quiet, earned kind of strength. And yet, even with all the progress, one truth lingered: healing doesn't erase the past. It just gives it softer edges. A few days later, the doorbell rang. It was Daniel again, holding another folder. "One last piece of business," he said. "I promise, this one's good." He handed me the papers, an official deed transfer, updating the property title to reflect sole ownership under my name, protected under Georgia's Elder Property Security Act. He smiled. "No one can ever touch this house again. Eleanor, it's yours, permanently." I looked down at the bold black letters, Eleanor Marie Brooks, sole owner. My hands shook as I signed. "This house," I whispered, "was the last thing Walter and I built together. And now," Daniel said softly, "it's what you rebuilt for yourself." We stood there in the kitchen, and for once, there was no heaviness, just pride. After he left, I brewed another pot of coffee and sat by the window. The garden outside was blooming again, small buds pushing through the soil like quiet survivors. That's when it hit me. Life goes on, even after it shatters. Maybe that's the real miracle. Not that you survive, but that you still bloom anyway. I lifted my mug to the sunlight and whispered, "Here's to second chances." It's strange how a house changes once the fear leaves it. Walls that used to listen now seem to breathe. The floors creak, not from tension, but from memory. I could walk from room to room and not feel watched anymore. That morning, I woke up to birds chattering outside the window and realized something beautiful. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. Still, the world doesn't stay quiet forever. It never does. Around mid-morning, I was in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped, that old instinct still wired to brace for bad news. But when I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was a young woman, maybe mid-20s, holding a small boy by the hand. Her clothes were neat but simple, her expression soft, uncertain. "Mrs. Brooks?" she asked gently. "Yes, I'm Naomi," she said, voice trembling just slightly. I think you're my son's grandmother." For a second, I didn't understand. Then my eyes dropped to the little boy. He was about 6, maybe 7. He had Jacob's brown eyes, those same eyes that used to light up when I made pancakes on Saturday mornings. My throat tightened. "You're Jacob's, his partner," she said. "We've been together a year now. I know this is sudden, but I thought it was time you met your grandson, Ethan." The little boy smiled shyly and waved. "Hi, Grandma." It was the first time anyone had called me that in years. I felt my knees weaken. "Come in," I said quietly. They stepped inside, and I noticed how Naomi's eyes moved around the room, not judgmental, like Vanessa's used to be, but curious, kind. The boy ran straight to the window, pressing his face against the glass to look at the garden. "Jacob didn't tell me much about you at first," Naomi said carefully, "but lately he's been trying to make amends. He told me what happened, everything." I stayed silent, still watching the boy trace circles on the fogged glass. "He's working 2 jobs now," she went on softly. "Construction during the day, deliveries at night. He doesn't make excuses anymore. He talks about how he ruined the best thing in his life, your trust. I swallowed hard. Does he know you're here? She nodded. He asked me to come. Said it wasn't right that you only knew him at his worst. I sat down at the table, and she joined me. The boy wandered in a few minutes later, holding one of Walter's old marbles he'd found by the bookshelf. He was careful not to drop it. Ethan, Naomi said, smiling, say thank you to your grandma for letting us visit. He looked at me with those brown eyes and whispered, thank you. Something inside me cracked wide open. I leaned back, taking a deep breath, and said quietly, would you both like some lemonade? Naomi smiled. We'd love that. As I poured the drinks, I remembered something Walter once said about children. They carry our stories even when we think the book is closed. Looking at Ethan, I realized it was true. Maybe Jacob had burned bridges, but this little boy was the chance to rebuild one. We sat together for nearly 2 hours. Naomi told me about her work at the community center, about how she met Jacob at a volunteer program for veterans. She said he didn't talk about his past at first, just listened, but little by little the truth came out. He told me he lost everything because he forgot who he was raised to be. She said softly, he said you taught him better, that you taught him decency. He just didn't listen until it was too late. Tears welled up in my eyes. He said that. She nodded. He wanted me to tell you. He's not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to show you he remembers. I sat there holding my glass, staring at the reflection of sunlight flickering across the lemonade. For years, I thought closure came when justice was served, but maybe it comes when you realize you don't hate them anymore. Before they left, Ethan hugged me, his tiny arms barely wrapped around my waist. Can I come again, he asked. I smiled through tears. Yes, sweetheart, anytime. As they walked away, I stood by the door long after they were gone, feeling something warm and fragile take root inside me. Hope. That night, I sat by the window watching the moon rise over the garden. The world looked the same as it always had, quiet, ordinary, but I felt different inside. I took out Jacob's letter from the drawer and unfolded it again. It was worn at the edges from how many times I'd read it. I placed it on the table beside Walter's old photograph. Looks like your boy's trying to be better, I whispered to the picture. Took him long enough, didn't it? In my mind, I heard Walter's laugh, deep, rolling, forgiving, the kind of sound that always made life seem lighter. And in that moment, I realized something important. Love doesn't disappear when people betray us. It just changes shape. It waits sometimes years to be born again in a different form. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat there smiling softly, the letter glowing in the candlelight. For the first time, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. The next morning, I found a small envelope slipped under my door. No stamp, just my name written neatly in pencil. Inside was a folded note, short, shaky handwriting. Mom, thank you for seeing Naomi and Ethan. They told me you were kind. I don't deserve that kindness, but I'm grateful for it anyway. You don't have to say anything. Just know I'm trying. Jacob. I folded the note and smiled. No tears this time. No anger either. Just quiet acceptance. It didn't undo the past, but maybe it didn't have to. Sometimes redemption isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it arrives in small and handwritten notes slipped under the door, like peace knocking softly before it comes in to stay. That next week, I woke up each morning to the sound of Ethan's laughter in my memory. It clung to the walls like sunlight that refused to fade. Every time I walked past the kitchen, I could almost see his little handprints on the glass of the refrigerator door. For years, my home had echoed with cruelty, with silence, with the kind of loneliness that hums even when you're not alone. But now, there was life again. Not chaos, not fear life. On Wednesday afternoon, Naomi called, Mrs. Brooks, I hope it's not too soon, but Ethan keeps asking if he can see you again. I smiled. Tell him his grandma is already making cookies. She laughed, then we'll be there by 4. When they arrived, Ethan barreled through the door holding a crumpled drawing, a house with a red roof, a garden, and 3 stick figures holding hands. "This is us," he said proudly. "Me, Mommy, and you." I bit my lip, fighting tears. "It's beautiful, baby." He handed it to me and whispered, "I made it 'cause Mommy said you were lonely." "I'm not anymore," I told him. "Not since you came by." Naomi smiled from the doorway. "He's been talking about you non-stop. He even told his teacher his grandma has superpowers." I laughed softly. "Oh, really?" "Yeah," Ethan piped up. "You made Daddy stop being mean and start being nice again." I froze. Naomi's smile dimmed a little. "He talks about Jacob a lot. They video call every night. Jacob's trying. Mrs. Brooks, he really is. I can see it in the way he talks about you. He's not the same man anymore." I sat down at the table, letting her words settle. "Trying." I repeated quietly, "That's more than I expected." She hesitated, then added, "He asked me to tell you something. He said you once told him that every lie burns longer than the truth. He said he finally understands what that means." My chest ached, not with pain, but with the weight of memory. "That was something Walter used to say," I murmured. "Looks like it finally reached him." We spent the rest of the afternoon baking cookies and playing cards. Ethan cheated shamelessly, laughing every time I pretended not to notice. For the first time in decades, my home felt like a place where joy could stay without asking permission. That night, when they left, I stood at the window and watched their car pull away. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, and for a moment, I saw my reflection in the glass, older, yes, but softer, lighter. The woman staring back wasn't the victim anymore. She was the survivor. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and carried it to the porch. The garden had come alive since spring, daffodils blooming, tulips opening like little miracles. Walter used to say the garden always knows when the heart starts to heal. Maybe he was right. I thought about Jacob, about all the things that had happened, about the night I'd stood by that same window, watching him leave in shame, and now here I was, watching his son drive away, leaving warmth behind instead of destruction. Maybe the cycle really could break. The next morning, the phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew that voice the second I heard it. "Mom." I held my breath. "Jacob." There was a long pause. I could hear cars in the background, faint traffic noise, the clatter of tools. "I'm working, so I can't talk long," he said awkwardly, "but I just wanted to thank you for letting Naomi and Ethan visit." "You don't need to thank me," I said softly. "They're family." He hesitated. "You didn't have to be kind to them after what I did. I don't deserve it." "No," I said, "but they do." Another pause. "Mom, I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm going to pay you back. Every dollar, even if it takes the rest of my life." "I don't want your money, Jacob." "Then what do you want?" I looked out the window at the blooming garden, sunlight catching on the petals like tiny flames. "I just want you to become the man your father believed you could be." There was silence for a moment, then his voice broke. "I'm trying." "I know," I said gently. "That's enough for now." When the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because forgiveness isn't always a word you say. Sometimes it's just the silence that follows a promise kept. A few weeks passed. Naomi and Ethan started visiting regularly, Sunday lunches, little park trips, even grocery runs. Ethan loved pushing the cart, though half the time we ended up with more cookies than vegetables. One Sunday, he asked out of nowhere, "Grandma, are you sad Daddy doesn't live here?" The question caught me off guard. I admitted, but not anymore. "Why not?" "Because sometimes," I said, smiling softly, "people have to leave to find their way home again." He nodded solemnly, like a little old man trapped in a child's body. "Daddy says you're the bravest person he knows." That one got me. My eyes stung, and I reached over to ruffle his hair, tell him I'm just stubborn. Naomi laughed. "He already knows that." We all burst into laughter, and for a moment, it was as if the past had dissolved into something gentler, not erased, but forgiven. Later that night, after they left, I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed low. On the table were the two letters, the first one full of guilt, the second full of effort. I thought about something I'd read once. Some storms don't destroy you, they reveal what's been standing all along. And I realized I'd been standing. Even when the world tried to push me down, even when the people I loved betrayed me, I never stopped being me. That was the quiet victory no one could take away. I looked around my home, my safe, sunlit, peaceful home, and whispered to the empty room, "Walter, I think we're going to be all right." Outside, the wind rustled through the garden, soft and sure, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The next morning came with a calm I hadn't felt in decades. No arguing voices, no slammed doors, no dread creeping under the skin like cold air, just quiet. Living quiet, the kind that hums with peace instead of emptiness. I made my coffee, opened the curtains, and let the early sun pour into the kitchen. Dust particles danced in the light like tiny memories, each one harmless now. For years, this same room had felt like a battlefield. Now, it felt like forgiveness. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened the door, there stood Beverly, my rock, my angel next door holding a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "You've been working so hard to put your life back together," she said with a warm smile. "So I thought it was time you had something new." I untied the string. Inside was a small brass key on a velvet ribbon, engraved with one word, freedom. I gasped. "Oh, Beverly, it's beautiful." She chuckled. "It's not for a door. It's a reminder. Every time you doubt yourself, I want you to hold that key and remember you got yourself out." My throat tightened. "You've done so much for me." She waved a hand. "You'd have done the same. Besides, watching you rise again, that's been its own gift." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the faint scent of lavender she always wore. Sometimes, family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the ones who help you stop bleeding. We spent the morning planting tulips along the garden path, laughing like two teenagers with dirt under our fingernails. Every time Beverly cracked one of her old lady jokes, the kind that made absolutely no sense, I laughed until my ribs ached. By noon, the garden glowed with color. Yellow tulips stood beside crimson roses. Purple hyacinths nestled between them. It looked like joy itself had taken root. When Beverly went home, I stood in the yard, looking at what we'd made. The wind whispered through the flowers, soft and forgiving, and I could almost hear Walter's voice teasing me. "You and that lady could turn a junkyard into paradise." I smiled. "We just might." That evening, as I sat down to dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mom, it's Jacob. I know you said I could visit when you're ready. Naomi told me Ethan can come by next weekend. Could I join them just for an hour?" My hands trembled. It had been nearly a year since he'd crossed that threshold as my son. The last time, he'd walked out with suitcases full of things that weren't his. This time, maybe he'd walk in carrying something else, humility. Maybe hope. I typed slowly. "Yes, 1 hour. Bring nothing but yourself." He replied a minute later, "Thank you. I'll be there at 3 on Saturday." Saturday came like a heartbeat steady, unstoppable. I spent the morning cleaning. Not out of anxiety, but readiness. It wasn't about appearances, it was about making space, the kind of space that forgiveness requires. At 2:55, I saw the car pull up. My palms were slick. I hadn't been this nervous since my wedding day. Naomi stepped out first, holding Ethan's hand. Then Jacob emerged, older, leaner, a shadow of the man who once strutted through this doorway with arrogance and beer in hand. When he looked up and saw me on the porch, he froze. I could see it all in his eyes, guilt, grief, longing, the fragile hope of being seen again. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. For a moment, words failed me. Then I simply nodded. "Come in." He stepped inside slowly, looking around like the house was sacred ground. "It looks beautiful, different." "It feels different," I said, peaceful. Ethan ran up and hugged my leg. "Daddy's here, Grandma." Jacob smiled weakly. "He wouldn't stop talking about seeing you again." I poured coffee for the adults, milk for Ethan. For a while, we just sat there, 3 generations trying to fit back into the same moment without breaking it. Naomi guided the conversation gently. like a bridge between two broken shores. "Ethan's been telling us about how he wants to help you garden this spring," she said. I looked at the boy, who nodded eagerly. "I can pull weeds, I'm super strong." I laughed softly. "Then you'll fit right in." Jacob's smile was small but real. He looked at me and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be here. For not calling the cops when I deserved it." I looked at him for a long time. The man sitting before me wasn't the manipulator I'd known, not anymore. His shoulders were heavy, his eyes tired, but there was a quiet steadiness in him that hadn't been there before. "Jacob," I said slowly, "I don't forget what you did. I can't, but I also don't want to live chained to that pain forever. So if you're here to be honest, to make amends, I'll listen." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I am. I've been sober for 6 months. I go to therapy every week. I pay what I owe on time. I'm trying. Mom, I just want my son to grow up knowing the truth that his father made mistakes but didn't stay one. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the boy I'd raised, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. You've still got a long way to go," I said. "I know," he replied, "but I'm walking it." When they left that evening, Jacob hugged me gently, not the desperate clutch of guilt, but the cautious embrace of respect. As their car disappeared down the street, I whispered into the breeze, "Okay, Walter, maybe he's learning." The wind rustled the tulips in reply. I went back inside, made myself tea, and sat at the table where it had all begun, the fridge, the labels, the humiliation. That same corner of the house that had once witnessed my breaking was now my sanctuary. And as I looked around at the home I'd rebuilt, at the life I'd redefined, one truth settled deep in my bones. Sometimes revenge looks like survival, and sometimes redemption looks like an open door. The week after Jacob's visit felt lighter, not simple, not easy, but lighter. Like carrying a bag that still had weight, yet no longer cut into my hands. He started calling once a week. Nothing long, nothing dramatic, just small talk, the weather, Ethan's school, how work was going. He never asked for forgiveness, and I never offered it. We were just learning to exist in the same sentence again. One Sunday evening, as the light faded over the garden, I sat on the porch sipping chamomile tea. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jacob. "Hey, Mom, I just made my 4th payment. Check your account. I'll send proof soon. Thank you for trusting me with this chance." Trust. That word landed differently now. It didn't sting anymore. It didn't feel like a broken promise. It felt like a bridge being rebuilt, one careful plank at a time. Beverly came over a few minutes later with her usual plate of lemon bars. "You look like a woman with peace in her pocket," she said. I laughed. Something like that. She sat beside me, watching the sky turn from coral to indigo. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "some people never get this. Closure, justice, a second chance at family. You built that from the ashes. Eleanor." I smiled. I had help. She waved a hand. "I just reminded you where the matches were. You lit the fire yourself." We laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from shared scars. A few weeks later, Naomi called. "Mrs. Brooks, we're hosting a small school fundraiser next weekend. Ethan's been begging for you to come. He's doing a little performance." "Performance?" I asked, amused. "What kind?" "He's singing," she said, laughing. "He insisted on dedicating it to you. That boy was going to melt me into a puddle one of these days. Of course, I'll be there." The following Saturday, I arrived at the small community center with a basket of cookies. The place buzzed with families, laughter, the smell of coffee and homemade pastries. Naomi greeted me with a warm hug. "He's so nervous," she whispered. Then I saw him, Ethan, standing on the small stage, gripping the microphone with both hands. He spotted me in the crowd and waved excitedly. "Hi, Grandma?" The room chuckled. The teacher smiled and nodded for him to start. His voice was small but clear, singing a sweet, simple song about love and home. Halfway through, he forgot a line, giggled, and said, "Oops, The crowd laughed with him, not at him. He finished to loud applause and ran straight to me afterward, arms open. "Did I do good?" he asked, cheeks flushed with pride. "You did perfect," I said, hugging him tightly. Jacob appeared a moment later, looking slightly out of breath, probably came straight from work. His hands were calloused now, his eyes humbler. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for coming." "Wouldn't have missed it," I replied. Ethan wriggled free and grabbed Jacob's hand. "Daddy, can we take Grandma for ice cream, please?" Jacob looked at me, waiting. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, hopeful, unsure, wanting approval. And maybe, just maybe, I saw the man he could still become. "All right," I said, "but only if you're buying." He laughed a real laugh this time, Nils. We sat together at a small ice cream parlor down the street. The place smelled like vanilla and childhood. Ethan smeared chocolate across his face and declared it the best day ever. Jacob looked at me over his cone. "You know, I still think about what I did. Every day. I wish I could undo it." "You can't," I said gently, "but you can keep doing better. And maybe one day, that'll be enough." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying to make sure Ethan never grows up to treat anyone the way I treated you. That's a start." There was a quiet moment, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then he asked, "Do you ever miss how things used to be?" I thought for a long moment. I miss what I thought they were, but not what they really were. Sometimes peace means letting go of the story you told yourself. Jacob smiled sadly. "Naomi says you sound like one of those wise narrators from her audiobooks." I laughed. "Honey, that's just what happens when you live long enough to stop lying to yourself." He nodded, looking down at his ice cream. "You know, I used to think strength was about control, about having things your way, but it's not. It's about admitting when you were wrong and still showing up anyway." I looked at him, my son, the man who had broken me, and now, somehow, was helping me heal. "That's the truest thing you've ever said." When they dropped me off later, the evening light painted the sky gold. Ethan kissed my cheek and whispered, "Love you, Grandma." I smiled. "Love you too, baby." Jacob lingered by the car. "Thank you," he said again, almost in a whisper. "For what?" "For not giving up on me even when you should have." I looked at him. Really looked at him. "You're my son, Jacob, and love doesn't disappear. It just changes its shape." He blinked hard, nodded once, and drove away. That night, I stood in my garden again, the wind carrying the scent of blooming lavender. Beverly's light was still on next door. I could hear her radio playing some old jazz tune. I whispered into the breeze, "You see that? Walter, he's learning. Our boy's finally learning." And somewhere deep inside, I could almost hear Walter's voice, soft, proud, steady. I always knew he would. The stars above seemed to shimmer a little brighter that night. Spring turned to summer, and with it came a warmth I hadn't felt in years, not just from the sun, but from within. My days found a rhythm again, mornings with coffee in the garden, afternoons helping Beverly with her crossword puzzles, evenings filled with music and small, grateful silences. But one morning, something unexpected arrived, a letter, neatly folded, no return address, my name written in Jacob's unmistakable handwriting. I sat at the kitchen table, heart trembling as I opened it. "Mom, I'm writing this because I've realized something important. Every good thing that's happening to me now, Naomi, Ethan, the peace I'm starting to feel, it all began the day you said, 'Enough.' That was the day I stopped blaming the world and started looking in the mirror. You saved me, even when I didn't deserve saving. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to live in a way that would make you proud again. Love, Jacob." By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the ink. I folded the letter gently and placed it beside Walter's photo on the mantel. "Looks like he's finding his way home. After all," I whispered. That afternoon, Beverly came by with lemonade and gossip, as she always did. She eyed the letter on the mantel. He wrote again. I nodded. He's trying. Bev, for real this time. She smiled knowingly. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Watching someone finally grow into the person you prayed they'd be. I chuckled softly. Yes, but it took a storm to get here. Beverly sipped her lemonade. Oh, honey, storms don't destroy strong trees, they show which ones had deep roots all along. Her words stayed with me because she was right. All those nights I thought I was breaking, I was actually taking root. A week later, I got another surprise, this one not in an envelope, but in person. Naomi and Ethan showed up at my door with a bouquet of sunflowers. "These are from Daddy," Ethan announced proudly. He said, "You're his sunshine." I had to laugh through the tears. "Well, tell your daddy he's full of charm." Naomi smiled. "He's been doing well, really well. He even got promoted to site supervisor. It's not fancy, but he's proud. I think he's finally at peace with working hard for honest things. That's all I ever wanted," I said softly. She nodded. He said something last night that stuck with me. He said, "My mom taught me the difference between surviving and living, and I'm finally learning to live." I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat was too tight. Ethan handed me a drawing, this time of a garden full of flowers, and 3 stick figures again. But now, there was a 4th smaller, standing between me and Jacob. "That's baby Lily," he said proudly. I blinked. "Baby, what?" Naomi grinned, tears in her eyes. "We haven't told anyone yet, but yes, we're expecting." "Oh, my Lord," I whispered, covering my mouth as laughter and tears came all at once. "You mean I'm going to be a grandmother again?" "Twice over," she said. "We wanted you to be the first to know." Ethan threw his arms around me. "You're going to have another grandkid, Grandma." I hugged them both tight, my heart swelling with something pure, not pride, not even joy, but peace. The kind that only comes when pain has finally done its job. Later that night, I stood in my garden again. The moon was full, silver light spilling across the flowers. My hands brushed against the tulips Beverly and I had planted months ago, alive, tall, unapologetically reaching for the sky. In the stillness, I whispered, "We made it. Walter, we really did." The wind stirred, cool and gentle, as if answering. I thought about the long road that had led me here, the fridge with the labels, the hospital loneliness, the tears in that tiny room. And now, standing here under the stars, I realized that every scar had built something stronger inside me. I wasn't the woman they tried to break. I was the woman who refused to stay broken. Because healing isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone new, someone wiser, gentler, and unshakably free. I looked toward the horizon, where morning would soon bloom again, and smiled. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "I'll plant something new." And with that, I walked back inside, not into an empty house, but into a home that finally felt alive. When I look back now, I can hardly believe how far I've come. I used to measure my life in what I'd lost: my husband, my savings, my trust, my son. But somewhere along the line, I learned to measure it in what I've gained: courage, peace, and the quiet kind of happiness that doesn't need anyone's permission. It took betrayal to teach me boundaries, humiliation to teach me pride, and loneliness to teach me love, the kind that starts with your own reflection. The woman who once cried herself to sleep over a labeled refrigerator became the woman who labeled her own worth and refused to let anyone take it again. Jacob and I still speak, carefully but kindly. He's not the boy I raised, he's someone new, humbled by consequence, softened by grace. And his little boy, Ethan, reminds me that healing isn't inherited, it's taught. Sometimes Beverly still jokes that I should write a book about everything that happened, but I think I already have written in every flower in my garden, every laugh shared over tea, every night I sleep without fear. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you can survive anything if you remember who you are. People may take your money, your peace, even your home for a while, but they can't take your dignity unless you hand it over. And I never will again. So to anyone listening tonight, if you've ever felt forgotten, used, or pushed aside, remember this: you are not done yet. there's still time to rise, to reclaim, to rebuild. If you want to watch the full story unfold, click the YouTube player in the description below.